I have always believed that the boardroom was a realm governed by strategy, intellect, and unyielding ambition. As I sat in the cold, metallic chair, watching the flickering projector cast images of our quarterly reports, I felt that familiar buzz of adrenaline coursing through me. My name is Mark Reynolds, 42 years old, a corporate executive navigating the treacherous waves of a multinational corporation. But today, as the agenda unfolded, something felt deeply unsettling in the air. The meeting commenced with the usual pleasantries, but my eyes were locked onto one man, Daniel Thompson. Once my closest confidant, he was now the embodiment of corporate ambition run amok. He had assumed a charismatic demeanor, but I could sense the venom swirling beneath the surface. With each word he uttered, I felt a prickling discomfort. Something was off, and I was determined to get to the bottom of it. Then the moment arrived. Daniel, leaning casually against the conference table, brought up a topic that a few moments ago I had thought was just a distant whisper: my wife Lisa. As we discuss our outreach strategies, it's essential to consider our social responsibility, particularly the kind of engagements we choose, he said smoothly, directing his gaze at me. Remember the community project Lisa was working on? It's a perfect example of leveraging personal connections for corporate benefits. My heart sank. In that instant, a cold realization washed over me. He was exposing personal information to fuel his agenda in front of the entire team. Lisa's projects were sacred, our joint efforts filled with passion and trust. I could feel the raw ache of betrayal coiling within me, tightening like a noose. The words echoed in my mind. He thought the cost of ambition was just a price to pay. I had thought ambition was a source of power, but Daniel was translating it into betrayal. As my mind raced, I couldn't help but assess the boardroom dynamics. The sharp glances exchanged among my colleagues told me everything. Some were amused, some were skeptical, others merely indifferent. I was no longer the central figure. Daniel had managed to shift the spotlight onto not just me, but my most cherished relationship. The dialogue shifted away from business and toward unwelcome personal territory, and it filled me with seething fury. For the rest of the meeting, I furiously scribbled notes, feigning interest in the discussion while my thoughts spun frantically. I mentally cataloged every detail, every glance that suggested complicity or agreement with Daniel's tactics. Was Jessica, my supervisor, in on this? The lingering question gnawed at me. Betrayal in the boardroom was not just a breach of professional etiquette. It was a strategic crime, and I was its unwitting victim. I recalled the hours I had spent brainstorming with Daniel, sharing dreams of success, each one a building block of trust. Yet here I was, haunted by the thought that the very foundation of our alliance had been nothing more than a facade. I needed to dissect the situation further, to uncover what lay beneath this cold front of confidence. My plan began to crystallize as I considered my options. Information is power, and I knew that somewhere within the cloud of scheming ambition, Daniel had painted himself into a corner. Manipulation and secrecy were now the tools of my trade. I would turn the tide, intelligently, methodically. I would not let my wife's trust and strength become collateral damage on Daniel's ruthless path to success. With a final, cold stare at Daniel, who continued to revel in his moment of deceptive glory, I resolved to take back control. Ambition could indeed cost more than one could afford, but I was determined to uncover every thread of betrayal and reclaim what was rightfully mine. The game had only just begun, and I would emerge victorious. As I left the conference room, a tempest of conflicting emotions swirled within me: anger, confusion, and a pervading sense of determination. The fluorescent lights of the hallway buzzed overhead, illuminating the sterile architecture of the corporate fortress I had once considered a sanctuary. I remembered the early days, the camaraderie, the laughter shared over late-night brainstorming sessions masking our relentless drive for success. Those days seemed like a distant memory now, overshadowed by treachery. I needed to think, to distance myself from the chaos unfolding around me. Flashbacks flooded my mind. Moments spent with Daniel that had cemented our friendship, the barbecues at each other's homes, and the strategy meetings where trust had been a default setting. How could he so easily weaponize the personal bonds we had nurtured? My thoughts drifted to Lisa. She was not just my wife. She was my partner, my confidant. the woman with whom I'd shared my deepest aspirations and fears. I had always encouraged her advocacy work, supporting her initiatives for community engagement, believing they would enrich both her life and ours. Little did I know those very efforts would become a pawn in Daniel's sick game. I felt a sharp pang of sorrow pressing down on me. Would she understand the depth of the betrayal? Determined to get to the bottom of this, I started to replay the conversations I had with Daniel over time, searching for clues I might have missed. How had I been so blind? Recalling our last discussion a week ago sent a chill down my spine. Trust is everything, Mark, Daniel had said, as we fanned out strategies for our upcoming project launch. Without it, we have nothing. I should have taken that for the forewarning it was. Sitting down at my desk, I opened my laptop with renewed resolve to analyze the situation. I organized my thoughts, outlining the relationships within our team. I had a keen insight into everyone's motives. Backed by a blend of corporate knowledge and psychological understanding of my colleagues, I trained myself to see beyond the surface. Trust is the currency of the corporate world, and I was now feeling the pinch. In the following days, I began my silent investigation. I discreetly observed Daniel, noting how he interacted with others. Was he too familiar with Lisa? I had my doubts. I set up small meetings with a few trusted colleagues, people who had supported me in the past but remained unaware of my growing suspicion. Each conversation turned into a delicate dance where I gently probed for information, all while guarding my own vulnerabilities. Have you noticed anything strange lately? I would ask them, masking suspicion behind a veneer of casual concern. Responses varied from face-bombs of disbelief at Daniel's recent behavior to ripple effects of compliments about his apparent confidence. I felt trapped within a web of alliances, maneuvering through conversations that skirted around the truth, but rarely penetrated to its core. In my evenings, I turned to digital forensics, a tool I had been trained on over the years, but never thought I would need personally. I began to gather evidence of Daniel's communications. Digging through emails and missed meetings, I looked for patterns, paired interactions that felt unnatural between Daniel and Jessica. Was she complicit or merely a pawn in his game? As days turned into weeks, I felt the tension build like a pressure cooker. Every time Daniel strutted into the office with that self-assured grin, it stoked the embers of my resolve. Questions swirled in my mind relentlessly. What were his motives? Was this all just a ploy for a higher position at the expense of my personal life? Each glance his way turned into a fraying thread of logic, pushing me to unravel the truth. Then came a breakthrough. Late one night, while combing through meeting records from the previous quarter, I stumbled upon an anomaly. The dates of a few meetings coincided with Lisa's outings related to her community project. It was small but significant. Daniel's participation in those meetings had been an inappropriate breach of personal boundaries, something nobody else seemed to notice. That's when I decided to confront Jessica. In a strategy meeting arranged under the guise of discussing quarterly projections, I took my shot. Hey Jess, can I ask you something about Daniel's role in the recent projects? I've noticed he seems a bit too involved with Lisa's work lately. My tone remained casual, but my heart raced. She shifted uncomfortably for a moment before saying, well, you know how he is. He likes to be in everyone's business. But honestly, it's probably just him trying to network better, nothing more. A flicker of uncertainty danced in her eyes. Jessica wasn't entirely convinced, and neither was I. I noted her hesitation, a crack in the facade. It fueled my growing instinct that there was more at play than met the eye. With a sharpened focus, I planned my next steps. I would gather evidence to expose not just Daniel's manipulation and deceit, but to ignite a response from all involved, regardless of the fallout. I needed a strategy stronger than any corporate defense. I would take back what was mine, laying out the breadcrumbs of betrayal for all to see at the upcoming project conference. The stakes were high, but I was prepared to fight tooth and nail in this professional war. Trust would be my weapon, and betrayal would be the soldiers I would marshal to win this battle. Even if it meant stepping into the shadows of the boardroom once more. My mind was set. In this game of ambition and power, I would reclaim control. As my investigation deepened, every day became an opportunity to unearth more evidence against Daniel. I immersed myself in digital forensics, meticulously combing through emails, meeting notes, and phone logs during late nights when the office was deserted. With each byte of data, I felt like a detective unveiling a case. My laptop became a treasure trove, containing evidence that could expose his calculated duplicity. I created a secure folder labeled Project Exposure, and filled it with documents that detailed the inappropriate and personal exchanges between Daniel and Lisa. His emails, a mixture of feigned interest and manipulative suggestions, painted a picture of a man exploiting his position. I kept records of meetings that coincided with her community events, and each screenshot felt more damning than the last. Meanwhile, I found an unexpected ally in Sarah, a financial analyst who had also sensed something amiss. One coffee break, she leaned closer and whispered, "Mark, have you noticed how Daniel has been getting too personal with his interactions lately? It just feels off." Her unease echoed my own, reinforcing that I was not alone in my suspicions. To gather even more evidence, I hatched a plan to entrap Daniel indirectly. I organized a casual lunch meeting under the impression of discussing our upcoming project. As we settled into our seats, I casually dropped hints about Lisa's initiatives. You know, Lisa's really passionate about her community work. It could align well with our goals. A flicker of concern crossed his face, but he quickly recovered. "Yeah, everyone has ideas. What matters is execution," he replied, attempting to steer the conversation away. I noted that hesitation, an opening I could exploit. Days rolled on, and mounting tension surrounded me as I sensed Daniel was beginning to monitor my actions more closely. He watched me like a hawk, suspicious of the changes in my demeanor. In contrast, Jessica's presence became increasingly scarce, a shadow slipping between meetings. Then the upcoming annual project conference loomed large on the horizon, my chance to turn the tables. I began assembling all my findings into a presentation that laid bare his manipulation, while upholding our company's values. Each slide was a carefully crafted weapon, combining evidence of his subtle violations and a powerful narrative to challenge the betrayal at play. Tension was palpable in the conference hall as executives mingled. I knew I had to time my revelations perfectly. As the keynote speaker began his talk, I took a deep breath, preparing the crowd for what was to come. When the moment arrived, I stepped up to the podium, my heart pounding with adrenaline. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, stealing glances at Daniel, who stood across the room with a faux expression of confidence. "What if the trust we place in our colleagues is being shifted for personal gain? What if ambition has become a weapon wielded against us?" Gasps spread through the audience as I unveiled my evidence. The room fell into silence as I detailed Daniel's inappropriate connections with Lisa's initiatives. With each revelation, I could see both shock and intrigue on the faces before me. None more so than Daniel's, whose facade of confidence crumbled. "This is a call to action," I continued, my voice steady. "We must reclaim integrity within our company. No more secrets, no more manipulation." The weight of my words hung in the air, and I felt a rush of empowerment. My years of trust building and collaboration against his sabotage had forged an invisible line dividing us. The gravity of my revelations landed heavily, and I could sense the shift in the room. Whispers turned to murmurs of outrage against this betrayal. Daniel's expression shifted from shock to venomous anger, his eyes narrowing dangerously as he contemplated his response. In that moment, I stood firm, resolute in reclaiming my respect and honor. I had placed my trust in the right intentions, and now, like the emerging light breaking through the dark corridors of betrayal, I finally had the upper hand. As the conference unfolded, it was clear the dynamics had changed. Daniel would no longer hold the strings, nor would he invoke fear hidden behind polished charm. The boardroom chess game had shifted, and I was prepared to play my next move. No longer the unwitting victim, but a strategic player in a game of ambition where I would emerge victorious. The aftermath of my presentation was electric. As the audience absorbed the revelations, I noticed the crowd's sentiment shift. My heart raced, not from fear, but from anticipation. I had exposed a simmering pot of discontent, and there was no way to put it back. Everything was on the line now. My career, my integrity, and the relationships I had built over the years. As the shock settled, I caught Daniel's expression hardening, a mask of indignation replacing the fleeting surprise. He leaned into a nearby executive, whispering furiously. The body language was clear. He was plotting his counterstrike. I braced myself for what was to come, knowing that Daniel's ambition would drive him to lash out. Over the days following the conference, I kept my ear to the ground, witnessing Daniel's frantic attempts to manipulate the narrative. He took to social media, crafting a victim's story cloaked in charm. His connections allowed him to twist facts, spinning himself as a misunderstood employee wrongly accused. But my colleagues began to doubt him, slowly recognizing the discrepancies in his tale. In the company's break room, I overheard snippets of conversations. People questioning Daniel's motives, expressing frustration over his maneuverings. It felt empowering to know that my efforts were building momentum. Yet, with every new ally, I braced for potential backlash. Damage control was key, and I knew Daniel would not give up easily. Determined to solidify my position, I convened a meeting with key stakeholders. We need a unified response, I began, standing before colleagues I had come to trust. We can't let Daniel manipulate the narrative. Our mission here is too important, based on integrity. Jessica, who had been quiet until then, finally spoke up. I've seen a change in Daniel lately. This isn't just about ambition. It feels personal. Her candidness resonated throughout the room. With support growing, we laid plans for an open forum where everyone could voice their experiences. Creating a safe space for discussion would neutralize Daniel's influence and reinforce the team bond. The plan felt bold but necessary, and I sensed we were collectively staking our claims to truth. As the open forum approached, I stood at the forefront, ready to guide the conversation. I wanted to ensure that each voice would be heard, each story valued. The audience assembled, a mix of camaraderie and apprehension filling the air. Thank you all for being here. I began, my heart steadying with each passing second. It takes courage to stand against manipulation and deceit. Together, we can reclaim our integrity. The room buzzed with whispers as colleagues recounted their encounters with Daniel. Each story shared was a thread unraveling his tightly woven narrative. We fostered an atmosphere of unity and trust, creating a shield against the forces threatening to divide us. Over the following weeks, I continued to witness Daniel's frantic choices lead to his unraveling. Reports of his erratic behavior circulated. His attempts to reinforce his position only deepened the fissures within our team. It had become clear that he was no longer a strategic player, but a cornered beast desperate to cling to his perceived authority. Finally, I received an invitation to meet with the executive board. As I entered the conference room, my heart raced, but my palms remained dry, fueled by a sense of purpose. I had spent weeks illuminating the truth. The time had come to present my case for transparency in leadership. As I stood in front of the board, I articulated the urgent necessity to re-evaluate corporate standards. We needed to ensure that ambition fueled collaboration, not division. Their responses were guarded, but I spotted flickers of agreement reflected in their expressions. My testimony was resonating. Just as I wrapped up my points, the door swung open, and Daniel stepped in, eyes narrowed with palpable tension. He no longer resembled the poised executive but a cornered animal, desperate to reassert control. "I'd like to address something," he proclaimed, voice laced with contempt. The board turned their attention toward him, intrigued yet cautious. I took a deep breath, ready to engage in this final struggle. I'd prepared extensively for this moment, knowing it could define our corporate landscape. Daniel confronted me with accusations of disloyalty, but I stood resolute, grounded by the shared resolve of my colleagues. As he continued his tirade, articulating his plea for understanding, I noticed the board's expressions shifting. Doubt etched itself onto their faces as they began to question the legitimacy of his claims. "Daniel," I interjected, steadying my voice, "I understand that this feels personal, but we cannot overlook the impact your actions have had on our team dynamic and corporate integrity. For too long, ambition has blurred ethical lines." The tension in the room thickened like fog rolling in off the sea. I could feel the weight of the moment hanging heavily in the air, and it was clear the tide was turning. Members of the board were beginning to reassess their loyalty towards him and the credibility of my testimony. In that instant, I sensed we were caught in a struggle not just for leadership, but for the very values that governed our company. I was no longer just a participant in a corporate game. I was an advocate for integrity, representing a renewed vision for our collective future. With each word I spoke, I could feel the resolve of my colleagues beside me. We had weathered the storm together, built a fortress against deception and manipulation. My confidence grew as Daniel's bravado waned, and I realized that this time, I wouldn't be labeled the victim. I would rise as the embodiment of the values we all cherished. The board looked back and forth between us, and I took that moment to lay down my final point. What we need is not just a leader who can drive success, but one who knows that success is built on trust, respect, and a commitment to collective progress. Otherwise, we only set ourselves up for inevitable failure. Daniel's furious glare met my unwavering resolve. It was a standoff that would determine the trajectory of our company. The battle lines had been drawn, and I stood poised to emerge victorious. No longer an unwitting pawn but the architect of change, ready to reclaim not just my position but the integrity of our organization. The room fell silent, every eye trained on the confrontation between Daniel and me. Anger flashed across Daniel's face as he realized he was losing control of the narrative. My heart raced, not with nervousness but with a fierce clarity. This was it. Everything had come to this moment. Are you really willing to jeopardize everything? Daniel challenged, his voice thick with frustration. This little stunt might feel empowering now, but what about the consequences? You're playing with fire. I stood firm, fueled by the support of my colleagues gathering behind me. And you would prefer to sacrifice our integrity for the sake of your ambition? I replied, meeting his gaze. Because what's truly at stake is not just our success, but also the culture surrounding it. We deserve more than manipulation and deceit. As I spoke, I could sense a shift in the room. Colleagues began to lean forward, the tide of sentiment clearly swaying toward my side. Daniel's hold was slipping. The cracks in his confident facade were deepening. You think this is about trust and respect? He scoffed, trying to regain control. We're in business, Mark. People are left behind. It's the nature of survival. Then perhaps you've forgotten what leadership means. I shot back, my voice steady. It's about collaboration and uplifting those around you, not about tearing them down for personal gain. This isn't just a job. This is our community. I felt a surge of determination as support blossomed among my peers. Our collective experiences against the tide of Daniel's manipulation fueled my resolve. Together, we would reclaim our narrative. Faced with the growing unrest, Daniel's anger morphed into desperation. You think you're strong? You've underestimated me. I have connections. I'll destroy you with a whisper, he hissed, but I sensed the vulnerability beneath his bravado. In a quiet but determined tone, I replied, those connections are not strength. True strength comes from trust and the ability to uplift one another. Your tactics have alienated us, and that will be your undoing. As murmurs of agreement rippled through the room, I felt the wind shifting drastically in my favor. No longer was Daniel a formidable opponent. He was starting to appear cornered and out of touch with the values that unified us. Just as I found my rhythm, an executive on the board leaned forward, breaking the tension in the air. Daniel, we've heard both sides here, and it's crucial we consider the kind of leadership we want. There's a moral standpoint at play, one that we can't ignore. The collective energy in the room intensified. Daniel's defenses were crumbling as uncertainty painted his features. Witnessing the board shift renewed my confidence. I knew I had the support needed to guide our future in the right direction. You think this is just a play to take over? You are all fools if you think Mark will lead you anywhere but to disaster. Daniel spat, but the cracks in his armor were now undeniable. I seized the moment. This isn't about me taking over. It's about all of us realizing that we can be greater together than apart. We can help each other succeed and build a culture of trust that no one can manipulate. Daniel's anger intensified as he realized the grip he had so tightly held was slipping through his fingers like sand. You think I can't rebuild? You think I'll let this go unpunished? With sharpened focus, I pressed on. Leadership isn't about punishing those who challenge you. It's about working with them. Otherwise, you'll find only emptiness beneath your throne. You're losing more than you realize. The atmosphere in the boardroom shifted palpably, with heads nodding in agreement to my proposal for a newfound alliance built on trust. More voices joined in, further opposing Daniel's claims. It felt electrifying as support surged around me. Amidst the chaos, Jessica stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. Enough of this back and forth. Mark's right. We need someone who will build us up, not tear us down. We don't want fear, we want community. As she spoke, I saw a wave of relief wash over my colleagues. It wasn't just me standing against Daniel anymore. It was all of us, united in advocating for a better future. The board buzzed with conversation, their allegiances shifting in real time. Suddenly, I sensed Daniel's grip on power vanish. He was cornered, and now the tide had truly turned. "This is your last chance," he shouted. "You'll regret turning your backs on me. I won't forget this betrayal. But we're not turning against a person, Daniel," I replied, my voice steady. "We're standing up against toxic leadership that goes against everything we believe in. This is about our collective values." Just then, an older board member placed their hand on the table, commanding attention. "Let's be clear. We need to reflect on what kind of organization we want to be. Do we really want to perpetuate this cycle of fear? Or can we move forward with a renewed commitment to trust?" Daniel was visibly shaken, the fighting spirit drained from his eyes. He realized the challenge he faced was more significant than he had anticipated. I took a deep breath and moved to seal the moment. The strength of a company is its people. Together, we can foster an environment where every voice matters. We can overcome any obstacle if we create a safe space for openness and collaboration. The room erupted into a flurry of agreement. Daniel's threats faded into a distant memory, overshadowed by the unified resolve that now radiated among us. In the end, the turning point of our company lay not in a single moment, but in the bond that had formed in opposition to deceit and manipulation. This was not just about leadership, it was about reclaiming our environment, a space built on integrity, resilience, and mutual growth. As we moved toward the resolution with new clarity, I felt an undeniable sense of pride swell inside me. We had transformed the atmosphere of fear into one of unwavering support, empowering each other to foster a community that could withstand any storm. The echoes of my journey culminated into a promise, not for me alone, but for all of us. Together, we would rise, not just as colleagues, but as a family dedicated to the shared values that defined who we were. The energy in the room had shifted dramatically. I could feel the weight of each gaze as my colleagues rallied around the idea of unity. This was more than just a meeting, it was the dawn of a movement within our organization. We were ready to forge a new path, one where trust and integrity reigned supreme. Daniel's expression morphed from anger to disbelief, and for a moment, he appeared utterly lost. His usual bravado had evaporated, leaving behind a man who was clinging to the remnants of his power. I could see a battle waging within him. The realization that his manipulation tactics had failed was starting to sink in. As the board members continued to converse, I glanced at Jessica, who gave me an encouraging nod. She had been instrumental in this shift, reminding me of the strength we had as a collective. It was vital for us to capitalize on this momentum before Daniel could regroup. An executive member stood up, his voice calm yet assertive. "Let's take a formal vote on how we want to proceed. We need to redefine our leadership structure to ensure accountability and transparency, especially in light of what has transpired." My heart surged at the thought of finally being able to create a system that valued voices, where integrity wasn't just a buzzword but a principle we dared to live by. I stepped forward, eager to add my thoughts. We must also think about how we communicate our new direction to the rest of the staff. They need to understand that change is happening, change that uplifts rather than divides. A few heads nodded in agreement, and murmurs of support rippled through the room. We should start by holding a company-wide meeting to share our new vision and values. Transparency is essential, Jessica added, her fire igniting more voices. Daniel, desperation creeping back into his tone, tried to interject. "You can't just walk away from everything we've built. This isn't reasonable." But I could see that he was grasping at straws. The tide was against him, and every attempt he made to reassert dominance only strengthened our resolve. The board had already begun discussing potential changes, outlining how we'd communicate our values to the entire organization. Let the record show that today marks a shift in our company culture, the board member said, nodding at the gathered representatives. We won't allow fear and toxicity to define us any longer. We'll foster an environment where everyone feels safe to share their ideas and concerns. With each word spoken, I felt the camaraderie tightening like the bonds of family. It was surreal. The shared experiences that brought us together were now manifesting in something greater. United, we had the power to redefine our working environment. As the discussions continued, I caught sight of Daniel's sour expression, a stark contrast to the smiles blossoming among my colleagues. With each plan drawn up, I could see the reality of his situation settling around him like a storm cloud. "Can't you see?" I asked Daniel, the passion in my voice rising with my conviction. "This is about growth for all of us. If you truly cared about this organization, you would recognize the need for transformation instead of clinging to outdated methods." He shot back, "This is my legacy. You think you can just erase everything overnight? You're naive." But the tables had irrevocably turned, and your legacy was built on fear. I countered, my voice steady. Now we have a chance to create something meaningful, not just for ourselves, but for everyone here and for those who will come after us. The board members nodded, exchanging glances filled with understanding. I knew my words had struck a chord. Their silence confirmed it. They were weighing the ramifications of this turning point in real time. Finally, as justice and collaboration united us, the vote was cast. One by one, board members voiced their support for implementing a new leadership structure that reflected our core values. In that moment, tools of authority and fear fell to the side, giving way to ideals built on integrity and respect. I could hardly contain my joy as the unanimous approval echoed through the boardroom. Our resolve to create a better future for the company solidified. There would be no backward steps. With a shared sense of victory, we began discussing actionable steps. We brainstormed ideas about workshops and training sessions aimed at fostering leadership styles that promoted collaboration and unity instead of divisiveness. Daniel, visibly defeated, sat in sullen silence. It was remarkable to witness how the collective spirit had transformed the environment. The barriers he had erected were crumbling before my eyes, and it felt glorious. As I turned my focus back to my colleagues, I could tell the excitement was palpable. Jessica leaned closer. "We can't lose this energy. We need to launch an initiative that honors our achievements as a team and emphasizes our importance moving forward." Her insights inspired me. I envisioned a company-wide event focused on celebrating teamwork, recognizing achievements, and fostering new relationships through shared success. "Let's create a retreat," I suggested. "A day away from the office to reflect and collaborate. We can redefine our mission, craft shared values, and build connections." Around me, heads nodded enthusiastically, igniting sparks of creativity and determination. Ideas began to fly, each suggestion building upon the last. Our future no longer tied to the shadows of manipulation, but brightly illuminated by the light of cooperation. As the planning unfolded, I couldn't shake the feeling of hope burgeoning in my chest. I had seen what collaboration could produce, and now I was witnessing the birth of a culture rooted in trust rather than power struggles. The meeting concluded with a renewed sense of purpose, each member walking away invigorated by our decision. I exchanged hugs and pledges of support with my colleagues, sealing the bond we had created. As I stepped out of the boardroom, I glanced back at Daniel, who sat silently, isolated in what felt like an echo of his former self. With gratitude, I realized this was not merely a victory for me, but for everyone in our organization willing to rise above fear and manipulation. Together, hand in hand, we were stepping into a new era, transforming our company into a haven of support, trust, and collaboration. Empowered by each other, I knew we could face whatever challenges lay ahead, united in our quest for a brighter future. As the weeks rolled on, our company underwent a remarkable transformation. The atmosphere was electric. Smiles greeted each other in the hallways, and laughter now echoed where whispers of doubt once lingered. Colleagues, previously hesitant to contribute, began to voice their opinions with newfound enthusiasm. We were no longer just co-workers. We had become a unified team, strengthened by shared values centered on trust and collaboration. The day of our retreat approached rapidly. Jessica and I were at the helm of the planning, excited to organize activities that would inspire teamwork and reflection. We chose a beautiful lakeside location, a serene escape from the office, aimed at fostering creativity and connection. On the morning of the event, the sun kissed the lake's surface, setting the stage for what promised to be a memorable day. My heart raced with anticipation and responsibility as my colleagues gathered. They had all shown incredible resilience and had come to understand the importance of our newfound unity. "Welcome, everyone," I called out as the group settled on the grassy bank. "Today is about us, our strengths and our shared journey. We're here to celebrate how far we've come and to envision the future we want to create together." Applause erupted, and a sense of pride filled the air. We kicked off the day with a series of teamwork exercises designed to promote trust and communication. The energy was contagious as we participated in challenges that required us to rely on each other's strengths. For one exercise, we split into small groups tasked with building a structure from limited materials. Ideas flew around faster than I could keep up with. It was exhilarating to see individuals stepping into leadership roles and collaborating seamlessly. I realized we weren't just constructing physical buildings. We were laying the groundwork for a new company culture. Afterward, we shifted to a reflective session where my colleagues shared their experiences, both challenges and successes. I was taken aback by the honesty and vulnerability they exhibited, their stories emphasizing the significance of openness. It became clear how much we had all grown together. Their words only deepened our bonds. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the retreat, Jessica proposed an activity that would crystallize our new vision. "Let's create something tangible to represent our collective values," she said, her eyes shining. We broke into smaller groups to craft vision boards filled with words and images that represented our aspirations. I felt an overwhelming sense of joy as I watched the collaboration unfold. This was not merely a creative exercise, but a vital step towards our shared future. When it was my turn to present, I stepped forward, heart racing. This process reflects what we want to achieve and how we want to get there. We have a unique opportunity to write our story, a legacy built on respect, integrity, and collaboration. The enthusiasm in the room was palpable as I saw commitment blossom in their eyes, an eagerness to turn our hopes into reality. As evening settled in and we gathered around a bonfire, I reflected on how far we had come. We were not just fighting against past issues. We were moving forward together, embracing a bright future. During that gathering, I acknowledged Daniel, who had become a distant thought, his oppressive presence replaced with laughter and connection among us. While I hoped he might understand the importance of fostering a supportive culture, it was ultimately clear that my focus belonged here, in this newly formed community. As the retreat came to a close, I felt a profound satisfaction. We had not only turned a corner, we were ready to embrace a path of unity, support, and collaboration. With our new vision affirming our direction, we were prepared to face any challenges ahead. Together, we would build a legacy, not born from fear but from our combined strength, mutual respect, and unwavering belief that success is best forged hand in hand. This was more than a company. It was a family dedicated to something greater than ourselves. Through shared commitment, we were now poised to create a future rooted in trust.